send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon. It's just past 3 o'clock. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. President Zelensky has demanded the immediate release of the mayor of Melitopol, Ivan Fedorov. It comes after Ukrainian authorities released CCTV footage, which they say shows Russian forces abducting him. GB News cannot independently verify the video. However, it's reported he was kidnapped from the city, which has fallen under control of Vladimir Putin's forces. The German Chancellor and French President spoke to President Putin this morning in a 75-minute phone call. They urged Mr. Putin to issue an immediate ceasefire in Ukraine. However, President Zelensky has criticised Western nations for a lack of involvement in peace negotiations. He also called on them to speak out against the kidnapping of an elected official.
The demand is simple: to release him from captivity immediately. We appeal to all world leaders who speak to Moscow: France, Germany, Israel, and others. I have personally called German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. I spoke with French President Emmanuel Macron. I will talk to everyone to free our people. We expect them, the world leaders, to show how they can influence the situation.
President Zelensky. A war against Russia in Ukraine would be World War III. That's according to US President Joe Biden. In a tweet, he stressed that the United States would defend every inch of NATO territory, but said a direct confrontation must be prevented. Meanwhile, the US continues to send troops to assist NATO allies. 130 soldiers have deployed from Fort Stewart in Georgia. They're on their way to Europe now to help deter Russian aggression.
The idea that we're going to send in offensive equipment and have planes and tanks and trains going in with American pilots and American crews, just understand, and don't kid yourself, no matter what you all say, that's called World War III.
President Biden. The bulk of Russian forces are now around 15 miles away from the centre of Kyiv. That's according to the UK's Ministry of Defence. Meanwhile, the cities of Kharkiv, Chernihiv, Sumy and Mariupol remain encircled, and they're suffering heavy Russian shelling. President Zelensky has accused Russia of refusing to allow people out of Mariupol and says efforts are being made to deliver food and medicines there. Health Secretary Sajid Javid told GB News that the UK is sending medical equipment to Ukraine.
We've been working very hard with our Ukrainian friends ever since the start of the conflict on humanitarian aid. So far, in terms of medical support, we've sent out 6 flights from the UK full of medical supplies and equipment and vital medicines and wound packages. We're coordinating also with our European friends to make sure that together we can provide everything that is needed.
Health Secretary Sajid Javid. Meanwhile, the French president has criticised the UK government's response to helping Ukrainian refugees. Emmanuel Macron said he expected better of Britain's visa policy, which requires applicants to apply in person, either in Brussels or in Paris. In response, the Home Office said it was bringing in measures to make the process quicker by allowing people to apply online. But speaking on the Polish-Ukrainian border, one city's deputy mayor, Bogusław Swayze, told GB News he had seen little support from the British government.
I do not know what the UK is doing. I'm here 15th day. I'm here 16 hours per day. We are tired. There is 1.5 million refugees that have already arrived in Poland. Some estimates predict that it may be a further 6 or 7, reaching up to 8 million people. Poland will not be able to cope with that number. So yes, we do need support. We do need help, and the UK should be one of those countries helping us.
Deputy Mayor Swayze. The Premier League has disqualified Chelsea owner Roman Abramovich from being a director at the club. In a statement, it said the measures were imposed following sanctions by the UK government. However, it won't impact the club's ability to train or play fixtures. Under the current rules imposed by the government, the club cannot sell any new tickets or merchandise. New research from the TUC says energy bills could increase at least 14 times faster than wages this year. They say that gas and electricity bills are set to rise by 54% when the price cap changes in April, but average weekly wages will go up by just over 3%. A government spokesperson said it recognised the strain that families were under, and it's introducing a £21 billion package of support. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, this is GB News. We'll have more at the top of the next hour. Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and heavy rain and strong winds will affect Northern Ireland, Wales and Western England, but mostly dry elsewhere. Let's take a look at the details. A wet and windy evening in store across much of southwest England, though something a bit drier and clearer will soon move into Cornwall, but it will remain windy here. However, it should be fine. A fine evening to come across London and southeast England, though here too the wind will be freshening. Some heavy rain moving in across Wales this evening, with the heaviest bursts at times in the west and south. Gales are likely in western coastal areas. At this stage, it should be dry across the Midlands, albeit with cloud continuing to increase from the west. Temperatures will be around 9 Celsius with a strengthening south-easterly wind. A fine, dry evening to come across north-east England with plenty of clear spells, becoming quite chilly in sheltered areas inland, but milder towards the coast where it will be breezy too. And it's a fine, dry picture across central and southern Scotland this evening, with light winds and clear spells. It will be turning quite chilly as the sun sets, but a very different evening across Northern Ireland, where we are back into the rain with some strong winds too, especially around the coasts of Down and Antrim. Tomorrow, rain will continue to push north and east across much of the UK overnight, with showers following. Windy with gales around some western coasts, and that's how the weather is shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
Now, almost 3 weeks ago, Vladimir Putin ordered Russian troops to invade Ukraine, and the military conflict between the two countries has since got really nasty. Western armed forces aren't giving Ukraine direct military support, but the UK, US and others have imposed hard-hitting sanctions, stiff restrictions on Russian trade and finance. And that sparked an economic war between Russia and the West, which impacts you and your family. Russia provides around 40% of the natural gas used across Western Europe, while pumping 10% of the world's entire supply of oil. Whether we like it or not, Putin runs an energy superpower. And that's why this conflict has seen oil prices on global markets rise from around $70 a barrel back in December to almost $140 a barrel this week. Gas has similarly spiraled from just 16 euros on European markets a megawatt hour to 335 euros over recent days. That's an astonishing 21-fold rise. The military and humanitarian aspects of this Russia-Ukraine conflict are, of course, by far the greatest and most tragic costs. But living standards here in Britain matter too. After all, the more the cost of living is squeezed across the Western world, the tougher to maintain Western sanctions. The UK's still significant North Sea oil output does make us less dependent on Russian oil and gas than EU nations like, say, Germany. But we still buy energy on global markets, so spiralling prices impact UK firms and households as much as anyone. Already, petrol's climbed from an average of £1.47 a litre before Russia's invasion to around £1.60 a litre now. Diesel soared even more, with prices in some areas now pushing £2 a litre or higher. More expensive gas means paying more for heating and electricity. Even before this conflict, the Ofgem energy regulator raised the average annual utility bill almost £700, from around £1,300 to almost £2,000 a year starting from next month. War-related turbulence on global markets means energy insiders now warn average bills could hit an astonishing £3 a year, £3,000 a year, when the price cap is reviewed again this coming October. In a bid to hit Moscow's finance, US lawmakers have banned energy imports from Russia, with Britain and the EU to some extent following suit. Over the last week, that sent energy prices even higher, with Russia warning oil could hit $300 a barrel, more than double even today's elevated prices. The Kremlin's also threatening to close the 1,200-kilometre Nord Stream pipeline, which since 2011 has pumped Russian gas to Germany, cutting a significant share of Western Europe's supply. Even during the Cold War, Moscow didn't block gas exports to the West. For decades, gas pipelines from the Soviet Union ran west, supplying not just what were then satellite states like Poland, but Western Europe too. But since the Soviet Union collapsed, Moscow's been quietly reducing Russia's dependence on Western markets. In 2010, Putin opened a 3,000-mile East Siberia Pacific Ocean, or ESPO pipeline, allowing Russian oil to be sold in huge quantities to China and other fast-growing Asian markets. And since 2019, the Power of Siberia pipeline, built alongside ESPO, has been delivering gas to China as well. As relations with the West have soured over recent years, Putin has performed a so-called pivot to China. Western Europe currently uses 541 billion cubic metres of gas a year, more than China's 331 billion cubic metres. But Chinese gas use is set to reach 526 billion cubic metres by 2030, as Beijing cuts use of coal, replacing Western Europe as a major market for Russian gas. And just before Putin invaded Ukraine, Moscow and Beijing agreed a second pipeline, Power of Siberia 2, crossing Mongolia, pumping Russian gas to power-hungry industrial regions near Beijing. History notes that when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan in late 1979, Western inflation was soaring as oil price spiked after the Iranian Revolution. Has the Kremlin made a similar calculation today? Invading Ukraine was always going to spark outrage and Western sanctions. So did Putin choose a moment when US and UK inflation was already at a 30-year high? It's tougher to enforce sanctions after all, when Western voters are already enduring a cost of living crisis, which then gets even worse. Russia exports not just energy, but wheat, fertiliser, industrial metals, a host of other necessities in abundance. This is a commodity superpower. These unprecedented Western sanctions will harm Russia, but they'll also seriously impact our living standards too. The cost of war to those hit by military conflict is measured in lives and tragic humanitarian fallout. But the economic cost to Western firms and families is of major significance, and our ability to bear these costs will determine how long we retain Western sanctions. Joining me now from Berlin to discuss all these huge issues, Ben Harris, Editor-in-Chief of Business New Europe. Fabulous to have you on the show, Ben. In the studio, we have Malcolm Grimston, who is Senior Research Fellow at the Centre for Energy Policy and Technology at Imperial College. We have Valery Morozov, a Soviet-era Kremlin advisor. Очень приятно. Nice to see you. And we also have Max King, a friend of the show, a columnist at Money Week, and indeed a former fund manager, a very highly experienced financial professional in emerging markets. Ben Harris, let's go to you. We're old friends, I should put that on the table, but you are an extremely well-known Western journalist. You've been knocking around the post-communist world since the early 90s. You've lived in Russia for many, many years. You're joining us from Berlin now. What do you make of these energy sanctions? How historically important is it that America is blocking Russian energy exports, the UK and EU also talking about blocking Russian energy exports?
The possibility of the West to block the exports, at this point, it's rather just a gesture, in so much as America is not very dependent on Russian oil at all. It makes up a very small part of its imports. And moreover, it has the opportunity to get oil from elsewhere pretty easily. It can change them. Secondly, because one country, America, blocks a small amount of oil, is not really going to impact the Russian business or economy very much. We're talking about $10 billion that they're going to lose, and that oil can very easily be sent somewhere else. So they won't even lose that money. It's just, as I say, a gesture. However, the symbolism of it is extremely potent, and that's already having an effect, in so much as if the oil is sanctioned, then other companies, other buyers, they've all suddenly become very reluctant to do business with Russia. And this is already affecting the business, in so much as the financial sanctions mean that banks are no longer providing letters of credit, no longer providing the finance, the ability for people to pay this oil. And even the Chinese banks, which are normally Russia's friends, are stopped providing letters of credit. And so this is actually going to have a very serious knock-on effect for Russia's economy, in so much as the liquidity that they should be getting, all the extra money they should be getting from these record high prices, is actually starting already to be quite hard to tap. And for Europe, that's a bigger problem. You said in your piece that one of the threats the danger here is not just that we block the sale of Russian oil, is that the Russians themselves stop sending gas in particular. Because, as you pointed out in your intro, that Germany in particular is extremely dependent on Russian gas, and it can't replace it. And if Russia went the full Monty, if it really goes to extremes and comes back with counter-sanctions, which they're talking about now, although we don't know the details, and they were to cut gas to Germany, that would plunge Europe into a massive energy crisis. Compared to last year, this crisis would be an order of magnitude more serious.
Ben Harris, hold it there. Malcolm Grimston, you are a long-standing energy analyst. I'm pretty surprised that we're now talking about sanctioning energy, that America is sanctioning energy. Are you surprised?
Yeah, I mean, again, the point with the UK is not dissimilar from America. We are relatively not dependent on Russian gas and Russian oil.
You've still got to buy it on global markets.
But indeed, yeah, the cost of oil in Europe, our main supplier, who is Norway, will be able to send its gas elsewhere if prices do shoot up. So from a cost point of view, we're stuck in this position. The world will gradually respond to this, as it responded to the great oil shocks of the 1970s. We're seeing Germany reviving some of its coal stations, which it was intending to close and keep them open. It could, if it took the stretch, do the same with its nuclear plants that haven't closed yet, although it says it's not going to. And we'll see, undoubtedly, further investment in renewables. But these things take time.
We're going to come on to the cost of living implications for viewers and listeners. Let's just stay with the geopolitics, the big picture. Valery Morozov, I showed a map there of Russia tacking east, the pivot east, the pipelines, 3,000-kilometre pipelines, with more 3,000-kilometre pipelines to come. Putin's serious about giving himself an option of selling oil and gas to China, which, after all, is where the growth is.
No, I would like to stress 2 points. First is that actually Kremlin or Putin or Russia has already alternative, including China. And only the export only to China last month has been increased 30%.
Wow.
And Putin signed an agreement with China to supply oil at a price, I don't know exactly, but I think it is about $80 per barrel, 100 million tons in 10 years.
And they did that deal in early February, didn't they? Just a couple of weeks before the invasion.
When Putin came to Olympic Games.
Yeah.
So, yes. And they made an alliance different from what you have in NATO in the West and all these things, but different. It is, the alliance of civilization. I put it like this. Different at a separate subject. But the most important thing what you should take into consideration, one, is that Putin yesterday, I think, he announced and he said that Russia is now supplying everything according to the contracts, and Russia will be supplying. What does it mean?
So it will carry on its exports to China and to the West.
And to the West.
As it did during the Soviet
And also,
days.
if you read carefully the decisions of the United States, there is nothing to block Russian export. It is to block Russian export in which way? That Russia in such a way, but Russia has opportunity to sell it, say, for example, the same oil to China, China to Singapore, and Singapore...
So they can round trip, as we say.
And it is
so there's lots of chest beating, lots of rhetoric, lots of grandstanding, as we say in English, but the oil and gas is still getting through. Let me bring in Max King. Max, you are a man of financial markets. You watch the markets very, very closely. Valery Morozov may well be right. He's a very well-informed guy, but the markets are still scared, aren't they? And that's why we're seeing oil up almost at $140 a barrel earlier this week, though it's come off slightly in recent days.
Well, Russia can orientate more towards China, but it can't orientate all its production eastwards towards China. Ultimately, it's going to have to send its gas and oil westwards. And guess where most of those pipelines go through? Ukraine. And still, I think despite the defeatism of the British media, I think probably led by the BBC, I think it's apparent it's only a matter of time before Russia is defeated, and Russia will have to pay reparations, in which case Ukraine will be in a very, very strong position to extract higher prices. So I don't think it's a good outlook for Russia, and I think that the reality is that markets are taking this relatively well, and that's why the oil price is not up higher, where markets haven't taken a worse fright. Markets, I think, see a Russian defeat, and it's despite what the BBC tells you, military people tell you that it's hard to conceive of a more disastrous military invasion.
That's really interesting, because we've been reporting, I mean, every day the oil price, the gas price is bouncing around. The gas price at one point this week was 16 times higher than this time last year, as almost 20 times higher when it was denominated in euros, as I said during my introduction. But what you're saying, Max, is if the markets were really, really scared, oil prices would be well above 150, heading for $200.
Or 300, as Putin believes, although he seems to know as little about the oil price as he does about military tactics. But I think that sort of tells you that actually markets are rather more relaxed than you might think, especially as we're now getting into warmer weather. I don't know about you, but the heating is turned down, it's turned on for shorter periods. That will be going on across the country and across Europe. And that means that we've all got a 6-month breathing space. And 6 months, the Russian army is not going to last 6 months in Ukraine.
What's your view? We're going to carry on with this discussion after the break. We're going to be talking about specific Western sanctions, specific Russian sanctions. We're going to be moving on to the impact of this East-West economic conflict on you and your family.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and every weekday we bring you The Briefing live from 9:30 a.m. The stories, analysis, and live debate that you need to hear.
Quite right, Tom, of course.
Was this something that had been considered at all?
Difficult to answer.
Gas-guzzling helicopters circling. Noise is being made here.
Joe Biden walking out.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, Monday to Friday, 9:30 a.m. on GB News.
Join me, Gloria De Piero, Monday to Thursday at noon for The Briefing. We go to the parts of Parliament that you won't see elsewhere. Plus, there's exclusive interviews with MPs from all parties.
But quite often, they paper over the real truth. Why does a working class lad like you join the Tories?
That's a good question.
Don't miss it, Monday to Thursdays at noon on GB News.
Welcome back. You're with me, Liam Halligan, on GB News. You're watching our special programme, Ukraine, the Cost of War. As part of this economic conflict, the West has imposed sanctions on Russia, of course, not just energy embargoes, but freezing the assets of prominent Russian individuals. And at the same time, of course, Russia has retaliated, putting limits on exports of fertiliser, various industrial metals, foodstuffs and other vital materials, all designed to put pressure on the West by tightening our cost of living squeeze. And on top of these sanctions by Western governments, Western firms have also been rushing from Russia. The UK's BP and Anglo-Dutch company Shell, the oil and gas giants, they're selling multi-billion-pound stakes in various Russian energy projects. With almost 150 million consumers, post-Soviet Russia has attracted an awful lot of investment from the Western world, and the likes of Ford, Boeing, Daimler, Warner Brothers, Disney, Sony, Apple and Dell have all broken ranks and left Russia. There are other companies too. There's also a shipping ban, if we can have the graphic on that, with the likes of Maersk, Ocean Network Express, MSC of Singapore, Hapag-Lloyd of Germany. They have basically said they are going to ban freight in and out of Russia. That means consumer goods going into Russia from Europe and America. They can't happen. Fertiliser, grain, foodstuffs, as well as other commodities like timber, they can't leave Russia. This is going to affect millions of people around the world and hundreds of thousands of companies. And when you have shipping freight isn't going in and out of Russia, that kind of silts up the economic bloodstream of the world. These shipping giants move literally millions of containers each year. And by refusing to touch goods in and out of Russia, they are seriously impacting the global economy, which will impact all of us. For my money, this shipping ban is one of the aspects of this conflict that hasn't been widely reported, and it's hugely important. Let's talk to Dr. Stephen Hall. He's Russia and international relations expert at the University of Bath. Dr. Hall, you're welcome to our special show, Ukraine, the Cost of War. Thank you for joining us. What's your take on these sanctions? Are you surprised, like myself, like Malcolm Grinston of Imperial College, at the extent of the Western response?
Well, thank you, Liam, for inviting me on. Yes, I think I am surprised, certainly, at the extent of Western sanctions. I think, like the regime, the government in Russia, I'm as well, were quite surprised watching the Security Council video of Dmitry Medvedev, who said, when I was president in 2008, the Russo-Georgian War, the West didn't really do anything, and in a few months' time, the relationship was okay, and they probably won't do anything again with what we're planning possibly in the Ukraine conflict. So, or rather, the independence of the DPR and LPR. So, yes, I am very surprised as to the extent of the Western sanctions and where they've actually gone and what they've targeted.
How long do you think the Western world, not to put too fine a point on it, Stephen Hall, can withstand the impact on our cost of living of these sanctions? There's a huge wellspring, if you like, of opinion supporting Ukraine, but as living standards fall, and particularly vulnerable households here in the West suffer, do you think that resolve could be broken?
Well, I think that certainly the resolve can be broken with the sanctions, counter-sanctions, and the sanctions that we've put on Russia could obviously increase the cost of living, and it will increase the cost of living. Western elites are saying that this is going to be a cost. That's indeed true. What we're also going to be talking about seeing is that people, Western media, the Western people tend to have a very short attention span, if you will, in terms of the Ukrainian conflict. Ukrainian conflict will become increasingly irrelevant to more and more people. And so the Western governments will start forgetting about Ukraine, and we will see backtracking on the sanctions. That's almost certain.
Ben Harris, editor of BNE IntelliNews. You run a group of correspondents across the entire post-communist world, not least in Russia and Ukraine, across the Caucasus. How long do you think this conflict could last, Ben? And how serious do you think the impact on Western living standards could be of these Russian sanctions?
I'm afraid it's going to last longer than we want, in so much as Putin's been going step by step. There were 2 rounds of diplomacy in February and January. And then the war started at the end of February, which was the 3rd round, and Putin called for talks between them and Kiev and Moscow. And as far as my reading is, those talks just failed, including the meeting yesterday in Istanbul between Lavrov, the foreign minister, and the Ukrainian foreign minister. And then that means I think we're now going into a 4th stage, and we'll see the military fighting in Ukraine escalate dramatically. Already in the last few days, we've had reports from Mariupol and Odessa and along the southern strip where they started shelling the cities. They started to flatten the suburbs. And our correspondent was reporting in Kiev the Chechen fighters on the outskirts of the city. And I think the plan now for Putin is to scale it up and really start to smash Ukraine in order to provoke another round of talks, because he's not going to give up. He's going to keep going until he gets his peace deal, his NATO guarantee of no NATO expansion. And at the same time, we've declared full economic war. The sanctions that have been put in place, particularly SWIFT and the seizing of the central bank's reserves.
That's the international banking. Ben, just to explain, that's the international banking system, isn't it? SWIFT, that's basically run by America and Europe. If Russia's outside SWIFT, it's going to be a lot harder to do business internationally.
They can't send money. You can't transfer money internationally. I mean, it's a huge blow. But it's to declare economic war, and the Kremlin has said that. And so I just want to warn, I'm afraid what might happen next is that Russia will retaliate. And at each step, Putin's gone to the extreme. We've had to recalibrate our understanding of him because he's gone to extreme measures to put maximum pressure. And I'm afraid in the next move by the Kremlin, they're going to put really painful sanctions. They're going to ban commodities, ban metals, ban the export of fertilizers. And the cost to us will go shooting up in that case. I mean, then we are looking at $300 oil, for example. And so this might be just the beginning. And that military phase could go on for months and months. And a lot of people are going to die. It's going to be very, very ugly, very bloody, very painful.
Vladimir Putin was born in the early 1950s, the year before somebody called Joseph Stalin died. He was born in 1950.
He's 1 year older than me.
He was born in 1952. He had a very ordinary upbringing, though he was obviously...
He is the first native Russian, ethnic Russian, starting from 16th century. as a rule of Russia.
As the rule of Russia. Very, very interesting. We've got some pictures of here. We just saw some pictures of him.
That is the main problem.
When he was younger. But tell us what you know of the man and what you think he's thinking. Ben Harris, and he's a very well-informed guy, as you know, said Putin is going to keep on going until he gets his guarantee that NATO is not going to expand. Do you agree with that?
You know, first, that's what I'm stressing all the time, that we are different civilizations. We are different people. We differently understand the world and different reaction. And your first contributor, say, for example, is saying that Russia and Putin, they were not prepared for sanctions. And all, it's absolutely nonsense. Kremlin was preparing since 2008. Putin was speaking many times that these sanctions will be, this will be, and everybody knew. The problem is that the reaction of Putin and Kremlin was not predicted. Say, for example, the West arrested the Russian assets of the Russian State Bank. I know and knew Nabiullina, the head of the, personally. I worked with her. So she could not do anything what Putin prohibited. It is not possible. For me, I can't imagine. But she actually left $300 billion worth, mostly euros, in the foreign banks, and they were arrested.
And they were sanctioned.
And they were sanctioned. But what is the retaliation? Nobody speaks about. Now, the foreign entities, banks, companies, and all these things. Russian, by the way, government, state, has no debts. But a lot of Russian banks, entities, and companies all have loans, Western loans. Now they are allowed not to pay back.
Indeed. We are hearing about this, aren't we? The likes of BP, Shell, they've got multi-billion-dollar assets in Russia. You've got Western brands, VW, Siemens, Samsung, Procter & Gamble, huge factories in Russia. Are they going to keep them?
Well, one question is whether they'll simply be nationalised by the Putin regime.
There is already a decision to nationalise.
Indeed, and so the assets are effectively worthless for those companies in the foreseeable future. And, in the very short term will be okay. That could be a matter of weeks. In the longer term after that, it's going to be extremely difficult. In the very long term, the world will respond, will move into different energy sources. But this is 5 million barrels a day from Russia. That can't be overturned by what we have seen this week, which is United Arab Emirates saying they will increase output. International Energy Agency.
The Saudis haven't, though. The Saudis are hedging, aren't they? The Saudis may or may not, and they control OPEC, the oil exporters cartel. They may or may not help the West to stand up to Putin.
There's an axiom in the oil industry that you want a high oil price, but not too high an oil price. You want the oil price that's high enough for you to make a lot of money, but not so high that people say, right, we're going to do something else and undermine in the long term. That was OPEC's thinking towards the end of the 70s, and I suspect there'll be that thinking going on within the oil industry today.
Professor Malcolm Grimston of Imperial College, thank you so much for being with us. Valery Morozov, also former Kremlin advisor in Soviet days. Thanks for your contribution. Max King is going to stay with us as we carry on this discussion on this GB News special, Ukraine, the cost of war on TV and DAB plus digital radio.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask. So why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
and I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome back to our special show, Ukraine, the Cost of War. Senior defence and security experts have told GB News that Ukraine could eventually prevail in its efforts to resist Russia's invasion if Ukrainian forces get enough Western-supplied missile systems. Our security editor, Mark White's been examining the various anti-tank and anti-air systems already being sent across the Ukrainian border.
Western-supplied missiles have, it's clear, become a real thorn in the side for Russia's military. Easy-to-use lethal technology that's given Ukraine's otherwise heavily outgunned forces a real sting in their tail and helped slow Russian advances. Defence intelligence sources say more than 20,000 anti-tank and anti-air missiles have now been supplied to Ukraine. This includes 3,615 UK missiles so far, with more on the way. In fact, the UK was the first Western country to supply and train Ukrainian forces in the use of the NLAW anti-tank shoulder launch system, handing over 2,000 missiles long before Russia invaded. They are highly effective line-of-sight weapons.
Some of these people literally are straight out of the office. I mean, they've got no military training. And so actually having a weapon that is easy to use is brilliant. But for many of these people, that firing that weapon will be the first military act of their life.
The UK will also supply some Javelin anti-tank missiles, along with the thousands supplied by the US and some other nations. The high explosive warhead has a much further effective range than the NLAW. The US has supplied more than 2,000 Stinger anti-aircraft missiles, with Germany sending a further 500 Stingers. But Ukraine says it's desperate for more. That's prompted the UK to announce it's now examining how to send some of its stock of Starstreak anti-air missiles to Ukraine. That system, which can be mounted on vehicles or even handheld, can propel a missile at 4 times the speed of sound and reach an altitude of 4 miles.
The difference between the Stinger and the Starstreak is the Stinger chases the tail of an aeroplane. It homes in on the infrared signature primarily from the engine exhaust. With Starstreak, you can meet the threat head on.
The Ukrainians have claimed their forces have been able to destroy more than 300 tanks, thanks mainly to Western-supplied missiles. And they also claim to have shot down around 50 Russian jets. We have no way of independently verifying those claims.
There will be no compromise on the part of the Russians. They will be beaten by the Ukrainians, which is why the missiles are so important, because those are the tools that they need to actually to do the business. I don't think Russia quite understands the trouble it's in.
Well, 14 countries have supplied missiles to Ukraine, and despite Russia's objections, they're continuing to smuggle many more over the Ukrainian border.
GB News security editor Mark White there on the supply of weapons. Now, we've been discussing the geopolitics, we've been looking at pipeline maps, we've been talking about oil embargoes, shipping bans, but what does it all mean for you at home, GB News viewers and listeners? Well, Caroline Rogers, she is a GB News viewer. She tells us that she is really struggling. A single mum from Kent. She consumes electricity via a prepayment meter, and she put £30 on her meter over the last week or so and says she's having to make tough choices. Great to have you on the show. I'm sorry to hear about your troubles, but we're very We appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us, Caroline. Famously, people that use electricity on prepayment meters do spend a lot more on their electricity. They're charged a lot more for their electricity than people who use direct debits and so on. What's the reality of this distant Russia-Ukraine conflict on the life of you and your child?
Well, I would say it is. I mean, it's not easy. I mean, because like you've been saying, everything has a knock-on effect. I mean, the prices of fuel going up, petrol prices going up, which has a knock-on effect for things like electricity bills and food bills and things like that. So it is just very, very difficult. And sometimes, like I say, like you said, I'm a single mum of a 14-year-old boy. He likes his computer and things like that. And sometimes I have to make decisions that I don't want to make. He asked me for a computer game and I say, well, at the moment, I can't afford to do that because we've got to eat. I've got to put electricity on and things like that. So it's, like I say, I feel so sorry for the people in the Ukraine. They are suffering so badly. But what is happening there, obviously, is not making a knock-on effect, and it's affecting everybody all over the world, not just people like me. It's just affecting everybody all across the world.
You have been using food banks, Caroline, though, of course, you do your own shopping as well. Are you seeing food prices go up in the supermarket when you fill up your basket? Are you sensing this cost of living squeeze tightening on you?
Yes, it is. I mean, to be honest with you, if it wasn't for my local food bank, the Street Angels, they are magnificent people. I mean, if it wasn't for them, I don't know where I'd be, to be honest.
And is this widespread, Caroline? Are your friends feeling the same thing? Do you feel that there's a cost of living squeeze happening across your whole community? Because from my observation, it's not just people in your position, Caroline, if I may say so, who are using prepayment meters and so on. People a little bit above you on the income scale who might have thought of themselves as comfortable. They're also saying to me that they're starting to struggle.
Well, yes, I remember reading an article a little while ago of this lady. I can't remember where she was now, but I mean, she was doing over 50 hours a week, but she was still having to rely on food banks because of the price of fuel and groceries are going up. So even though she works 50 hours a week, she's still having to rely on food banks. So, like you say, everybody is feeling the pinch, no matter where they are.
Later this month, Caroline, the Chancellor Rishi Sunak, he's got his spring statement. It's meant to be just a sort of a routine thing, a sort of mini budget under ordinary circumstances. It's taking on the form of a really big political event. What would you say to the Chancellor? What would you say to Prime Minister Boris Johnson and the government as a whole? To what extent do you think ordinary people need help now in order to provide themselves and their families with the necessities?
Well, me personally, I would say stop raising prices of utility bills because it is literally cutting everybody in half. A lot of people are having to decide whether to heat or eat. They can't do both. So I would say cut the prices of utility bills because I think it's absolutely disgusting that people have to choose whether to heat their homes or to eat and feed their families. I think it's terrible.
Caroline Rogers, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us. All the best to you and your son. How about the Chancellor scraps the VAT on fuel bills, as we've been campaigning for here on GB News? We'll stay in touch with you, Caroline, and thanks a lot for joining us here on GB News. Let's talk now to Helen Barnard. Helen is Deputy Director at the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, a highly influential charity that works to combat poverty in the UK. Helen, thanks a lot for joining us once again here on GB News. How urgent now is the need for the government to act to help not just marginal families with low incomes with this cost of living squeeze in light of this East-West economic conflict, but families further up the income scale too?
Yeah, I mean, of course, we were in a cost of living crisis before the war in Ukraine started. So I think it's important we don't allow a narrative to emerge which says this is all about the war. We were already in this situation, but of course, we can see it's going to get worse. So we're seeing the price cap for the energy costs going up by about £700 next month. The earliest predictions of what might happen in October, which is the next time it goes up, suggests that we could see another nearly 50% rise in bills. So this is going to get, as you said, tighter and tighter for people. And so far, the government, I would say, has ducked the challenge of doing something meaningful to help people with those costs. And as you say, the spring statement, I think it's a big moment for the Chancellor to say, is he actually going to step up and help people with this? Or are they going to duck the challenge again and leave people exposed to a really dire situation in many cases?
During my regular lunchtime show, Helen, you've joined me. We've been discussing the cost of living squeeze. We've been trying to give tips and ideas for lowering your energy bills. You and I have discussed scrapping the VAT on energy bills and the fact that the Chancellor should do that. What else do you think he should do? Should he be now scrapping that increase in national insurance, Helen, given that, as we just heard there from Caroline Rogers, a lot of people who are really struggling here in the UK with this cost of living squeeze, they're working 40 or 50 hours a week. Why are we taking money off them?
And of course, now the majority of people in poverty for quite a long time now have been living in a working household. That is the nature of poverty these days. I mean, I think we need to think in terms of who are the people we are most worried about. And at the moment, it's people on the lowest incomes. So Crisis, the homelessness charity, brought out some analysis yesterday. They've looked at the fact that rents are rising. It's not just energy bills. Rents are going up. Help with rents is frozen again. They were saying that if you look at renters in most parts of England, they will have to go without the equivalent of a day a week's food and fuel in order to keep up with the rent and avoid homelessness. In high-cost areas like London, it could be 2 days a week. You'd have to go without food and energy in order to cover your rent. Now, that is obviously an impossible situation. So far, what the government hasn't done is use the tool that is designed to get money to the poorest people quickly, which is the benefit system. So I think that's got to be the first thing. Where we know people are skipping meals, they're getting their health into a poor condition, they are running up debt, we need to get money to those people quickly. So right now, benefits are due to go up by 3% next month, when inflation is heading up to 8% upwards. So we should be at least uprating the money for the poorest people to keep up with costs. Surely that's a no-brainer.
I agree. I think politically that's a non-starter. I do think my view would be, as an analysis, it's not my political view, that the Chancellor is going to have to do more. Helen Barnard of Joseph Brown Foundation, thank you so much. We look forward to talking to you again soon. Another person who's been helping us here on GB News to give some tips and advice is Joe Malinowski. He's the founder of The Energy Shop. Joe, we're a bit pressed for time, but since we last spoke, energy prices have gone up higher. Since we last spoke, energy analysts are now talking about £3,000 for the average annual cost of your utility bills. Is there anything people can do? Is there any chink of light that you can give them?
I'm afraid not at the present moment in time. We've had another extraordinarily volatile week, probably the most volatile week we've seen so far in this crisis. On the rumour that the US and the EU were about to impose sanctions on Russian oil and gas imports, we had a hugely wild day on Monday. Prices got up to 700 pence a therm, around the 700 pence a therm level. Put that into context, that's actually implying £4,000 energy bills. Since then, the markets have settled down. We've seen the details of what those sanctions are. It won't be as dramatic on the price of oil and gas has been rumoured, and we've seen prices halve. So we're not looking at the £3,000 mark at the moment. We're probably closer, only 2,400. But that's a huge increase compared to where we were a year ago. That's more than doubling.
Less than 1,000 a year ago, the average annual utility bill.
Exactly.
Unbelievable.
And that's a situation where we're looking at sanctions from the West onto Russia. You've talked about the reciprocal effect of Russia now starting to put its own economic measures in place, its own sanctions on things like fuel, food products. They haven't talked about energy yet. The consensus feeling is it won't affect energy because they rely on those cash flows to fund the war machines. But if Russia started to put sanctions and started cutting back on exports of gas into Europe, I mean, all hell would break loose, and the sky's the limit onto where those energy bills could go. So I'm sorry, more bad news this week.
Max, you came here to talk to me about financial markets and geopolitics, as we often discuss, both on my regular show and away from television. What are your thoughts listening to this discussion? We just heard from Caroline Rogers there. We're hearing from Joe Malinowski, who specialises in helping people on marginal incomes with their fuel bills. Where does this end?
Well, I think the government is paying the price for 10, 20, 50 years of encouraging people to believe that they can wave a magic wand and make their problems go away. And they are the prisoner of decisions made many years ago, the extraordinary extravagance of the pandemic, the wrong energy decisions, and now the government has no money, and it can't alter international energy prices, and the most tempting thing it can do is to do what the French government have done, which is make things worse by bankrupting the energy industry. So there is no government help there. There is not much. The government is completely boxed in. So I think that, as Caroline Rogers sort of implied between the words, that actually, people have to sort this problem out for themselves. There is no rescue coming over the horizon, and you just have to battle through it.
And you, like me, were a child of the 70s, if I may say so. It's increasingly reminding me this time of the 70s. We had the oil price shock of 1973. We had the oil price shock of 1979. Does it feel like that to you?
Better clothes and better music. But no, I think the difference in the 70s was, in the 70s, people believed inflation was endemic and would never go away. And I don't think people believe that now. There was an inflation shock in the short term. I think the comparisons of the 70s are exaggerated, and it is far too soon to think that we've got endemic inflation.
Max King, columnist of Money Week, financial analyst, thanks for joining us on this GB News special. Lots of you getting in touch. Tony says the blowback from sanctions will lead to European governments collapsing. Putin knows this. Mark emailed us to say, yes, the Russian invasion has now caused massive cost increases, especially in oil and gas, but we must not allow the government to blame all our cost of living issues on the war, as locking us all down due to COVID cost around £500 billion and tons of money printing. Thanks for your emails. You've been watching a GB News On The Money special, Ukraine, the cost of war.
Start off your GB News Sunday with Stephen and Anne at breakfast from 6 a.m. At 10, join the political correction. From 12 till 6, it's Alistair, Darren, Inaya and Nana. At 7, join Free Speech Nation for a laugh that won't be cancelled. At 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight, followed by Headliners. That's Sunday on GB News.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and heavy rain and strong winds will affect Northern Ireland, Wales and Western England, but mostly dry elsewhere. Let's take a look at the details. A wet and windy evening in store across much of southwest England, though something a bit drier and clearer will soon move into Cornwall, but it will remain windy here. However, it should be fine. A fine evening to come across London and southeast England, though here too the wind will be freshening. Some heavy rain moving in across Wales this evening, with the heaviest bursts at times in the west and south. Gales are likely in western coastal areas. At this stage, it should be dry across the Midlands, albeit with cloud continuing to increase from the west. Temperatures will be around 9 Celsius with a strengthening south-easterly wind. A fine, dry evening to come across north-east England with plenty of clear spells, becoming quite chilly in sheltered areas inland, but milder towards the coast where it will be breezy too. And it's a fine, dry picture across central and southern Scotland this evening with light winds and clear spells. It will be turning quite chilly as the sun sets, but a very different evening across Northern Ireland where we are back into the rain rain with some strong winds too, especially around the coasts of Down and Antrim. Tomorrow, rain will continue to push north and east across much of the UK overnight, with showers following. Windy with gales around some western coasts, and that's how the weather is shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.